I'm a DJ boy, going to Dcentral, making NFT, from DeFi use, being crypto poor but JPay rich.
So with that said, covering decentralized cloud, let me introduce to the stage our moderator, self-titled Nerd Supreme, which I absolutely love, Seth, MineYour.Biz, Estrada. Woo.
Hey, Decentral Austin, how the heck are you? This is a big auditorium, so I'm gonna need you to make some noise. Decentral Austin, how are you? Awesome. Now, I've taken for granted that you are here because you're as excited about Web3 and the future of decentralization of the internet as I am. Is that accurate? All right, I want you to welcome my panel on stage, the absolute cutting edge of Web3 being decentralized, being able to edge out the old guard of our web experience into a permissionless and sovereign experience. Let's start with our number one speaker. We've got Ollie from CUIDO. Give him a hand.
Hey Seth, thank you. So I'm Ollie from CUIDO. So we're building a distributed cloud computing platform to really power the future of blockchain and bring powerful computing in order to have that element of scalability to things. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Seth.
Awesome, yeah. Guys, we're gonna also have 3 other speakers. You already saw them on the playbill, but let me bring out Patrick. Oh, no, did I get the order? The order wrong? Let's bring Patrick. Come on out. I got it totally wrong. Patrick is coming out from JACKAL. Give him a round of applause.
Thanks for having me. Check. Perfect. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to be with some really, really great minds around the Cosmos ecosystem.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for joining us. And let's go ahead and bring out Lex and Greg together so we don't possibly get this wrong. Bring them out. We got Lex from Passage and Greg Osuri from the Akash network. Let's have a seat, gentlemen. And without further ado, they've given us a very short amount of time, and we've got a lot that we want to pack in. But first off, let's go around the panel. And you already heard from Ollie and from Patrick, but Lex, tell us about Passage briefly, like you and Passage in 30 seconds.
Yeah, Passage is a decentralized virtual experience platform. We're building interoperable virtual experiences on Cosmos as a layer 0, so we have a layer 1 chain. We've done events with big teams like Capitol Records, Amazon, American Girl. Previously, we worked in kind of the traditional media and event space, doing stuff for Warner Brothers, Disney, Red Bull, Marvel, and we're trying to bring that mainstream media audience into accessible, interoperable virtual experiences.
Awesome. And Greg Osuri from the Akash network.
My name is Greg Osuri. I'm the founder for Akash. Akash, in simplest terms, is an open market for cloud-grade compute. It is the world's first open market and the largest, and the fastest growing as well in terms of adoption. The idea behind it is to unlock unused capacity. About 85% or so of global data center capacity is unused. So by enabling those providers to offer their compute in an open, competitive way, we can solve efficiency problems, which the outcome is the cost. A cost costs about 95% lower than your traditional cloud. Like last night, I was able to deploy a osmosis validator for $7 a month. So when the bear market hits and profitability for node operations is in question, AKT is your best friend. I highly recommend you go check it out. So,
yeah, awesome. Great to have all 4 of you gentlemen on the panel. Let's start off by talking about something that I think most people are interested in as we get into this newest phase of layer 0s and this newest phase of blockchain infrastructure. It's scale and speed, right? A lot of people are asking, okay, if I want something really, really fast, why don't I just deploy on AWS, right? Like, how do I manage to get that kind of performance in a decentralized and permissionless way? And it seems like in some people's minds, they've got that demand for really fast web applications, and they worry that they won't get that from some of the solutions that you're building right now. What have you found is a problem you've had to solve to meet those expectations?
So it comes. Hello. So it comes down to redundancy versus security, right? On-chain computing is hyper redundant. That's why it's expensive. That also is why it's secure. Off-chain compute, the redundancy depends on the scheduling algorithm, right? Amazon is not redundant. I mean, it's redundant if you kind of built it like, in a traditional Web 2 world, but if Amazon data center goes down, it goes down, right? It is redundant with the scope of the data center of operations. So the challenge is to design something that allows for cross-site or maximum possible redundancy while allowing for performance, right? So the easy shortcut obviously is to go to Amazon and get the performance. The harder choices will be to use one of the decentralized options to do so, where the user experience is not on par with Amazon's, but But hey, last night I was able to deploy a validator within 5 minutes from 3,000 feet using clicks. So we get in there very, very quickly.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Just to pump Akash's tires a little bit more, when you move from an Amazon to something where you're using Akash for cloud compute, you're also getting rid of centralized choke points of failure. So when you talk about the ability for Akash to be a little bit more resilient, you're completely distributed, it's a really, really great look. And that's why I'm particularly excited about working with people that are doing cloud compute up here, because JACKAL, what we do is we do storage, right? And JACKAL doesn't do math, but JACKAL has a lot of parking space, essentially, if you want to break it down that way. So we're really, really excited to be here, really excited to hear from a lot of you different guys, and hopefully excited to work together as well.
Yeah, I love that on the JACKAL side, because it's so important for cloud computing to both have the compute side, or cloud in general, to have both compute and that decentralized storage aspect to it, because ultimately we're scaling blockchain. Blockchain is an inherently transactional database, which isn't built for the high throughput type Web 2 world that we're coming from. And so to supplement that with that incredible power of Web 2 computing as well as Web 2 storage, but now we're converting it into a Web 3 space. It takes what the von Neumann architecture of 1944 was and modernizes it completely. So what's taken us 80 years to do in the traditional computing space, we're now hopefully doing in 8 years in the blockchain world.
Just to add on that as well, when you go to build humane and ethical technology, it comes with a trade-off a little bit, right? So if you want to build these really permissionless systems, you want them to be really resilient, sometimes they come at a trade-off, and it's a lot more R&D. So that's kind of why I'm really excited to continue to build this space. And when you talk about speed picking up as we continue to evolve, it's going to get there. It just may give us a few seconds.
And I think from the development side, like, we get to solve those problems so that end users don't have to, right? Like, we can figure those things out. We can figure out what needs to be on the blockchain. You want to take the smallest unit of information, whether it's the relationship in a decentralized cloud marketplace, just your relationship with the compute provider, take the smallest thing. We can figure those things out as builders, but from our perspective with Passage, the goal is that the end user doesn't have to deal with that, right? We have so many barriers to entry in the blockchain space, in the Web3 space, that we don't want compute to be another one of them, right? The biggest leverage point of the decentralized cloud, whatever the infrastructure is, whether it's storage or compute, it gives us the opportunity to take that burden off the end user. And the way that Passage is leveraging that is to deliver high-end Unreal Engine 5 experiences in the browser, because the compute's somewhere else, right? So like you said, like, it's a balance of trade-offs where, you can create security where you want to create security, but we also have the opportunity in extrapolating the compute layer from the user to take a huge burden, which gives us an opportunity to onboard new users into the space in a technological space that's inherently filled with roadblocks.
Yeah, awesome. Let me ask each one of our panelists just a little more directly on the question of scale and speed. What have you found has been a big hurdle that your team has been able to overcome so that your user experience isn't something that anybody who's non-technical has to worry about at all? Like, what does that actually look like for Passage and for JACKAL, for CUIDOs, and then obviously for Akash, you're much more dev-facing. I don't think the average person who's who wants to use a typical like web service is thinking like, you know what, where is this hosted? But it's seamless, right? So how have you solved problems there?
Yeah, I mean, even for dev facing, I mean, developer experience is key, right? So the approach we took was to be hyper developer focused and not necessarily operator focused, right? So what that means is we emphasized on extremely clean interface design when it comes to APIs, right? When it comes to machine-to-machine interaction, when it comes to performance of machine-to-machine interaction. So, and our intention of that design was that any system, in order to deliver a superior user experience, you have to make the trade-offs. And we don't know what trade-offs we need to, what the user will make and what they prioritize to deliver the experience, right? So we wanted the community to decide based on their users they serve. So now we have, I believe, 3 different applications built on top of Akash that do user experience in one form or the other. One is Akash Lytics, which does a non-custodial deployment, another one is Praetor, which does provider onboarding super simple. Another one is Perry, and I think they do a more like a Netlify style, like git push deploy and Akash. And they figured out, because they like the composability Akash gives, and the permissionlessness and the guarantees of the platform, right? And so we made a conscious choice of focusing on the developer and the developer experience, and having developers build tooling. We think that's a much better scalable way, instead of like trying to focus on the operator, right? Like, if people ask me like, why is there not a simple way to deploy my WordPress website? I'm like, well, it is not, because the deployer of a WordPress website is not necessarily a technical person. You can do it, but it's just going to take a lot more work. So we're going to wait for a WordPress hosting platform as a service to make the trade-offs that, that is easy for the user base to use Akash instead of us doing it. So we took a community-first approach when it comes to operator usability. So and that's a strategy, and other people have other strategies, but we believe in a developer-first strategy.
Yeah, let the developers decide, how things need to be implemented, and just give them the options for composing these things. I would say in terms of scaling, one of the biggest opportunities for scaling a decentralized cloud is the fact that if you decentralize the relationship between the compute provider, the person who is offering hardware, and the person who wants to build an application, then anybody can contribute, right? I can't go and contribute compute to AWS or Azure or whatever. So you're creating a greater scaling opportunity. You've got more work to do in terms of defining the format in which that comes in, but you've got a huge opportunity. I mean, even thinking about the transition to ETH 2.0 and the amount of GPU capacity that's going to be available to enter a decentralized cloud network, that's some serious scaling opportunity.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so for JACKAL, when it comes to, can you repeat the question? Because we've gotten so far off track.
No, so we're still kind of on the topic of scale and speed, and I guess the question is like, where did you see opportunities, and what are some hurdles that JACKAL had to overcome to deliver scale and speed?
Yeah,
what did that look like for you?
Yeah, JACKAL had a bunch of different ideas originally, and everyone will probably laugh at us. We tried to get everything on chain originally, where we wanted a base 64 encode and then get everything completely programmable privacy and you leveraging secret network smart contracts. But what we decided to do, because we want to bring speed, utility, and most importantly privacy for us, because our big play is only the end user with their private key can access their data. And that's really, really important to us, and we're locked out from the ground up. So we try to build this ethical, if you think about it this way, it's like Tor browser meets BitTorrent meets smart contracts.
Yeah, and you'll have some hard constraints just in generating proofs and,
Absolutely.
and encrypting.
It's end-to-end encrypted. It'll always be a little bit slower, but we're pretty close. So when it comes to speed and utility of the product, what we chose to focus on is actually a peer-to-peer caching layer, where we'd also lean on another provider for cold storage archiving, because we can only incentivize so much with a token, right? So when we focus on a caching layer, we can bring multiple layers of hot storage to cold storage depending on the needs of the protocol. So when it comes to the speed, it's one of our biggest priorities, but also drawing a hard line in the sand about privacy, so that only the end user with their private key can access, manage, and share their data.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I love that developer-first focus. I think we've seen it already in the space of the cloud giants of Web 2, and so that as a focus for cloud and compute in Web 3 just makes sense. So, but in terms of hurdles for us, we're still super early in terms of CUIDOs. I mean, we just announced the genesis process of our blockchain with our validators earlier today, which was very exciting. But on the compute side, we've got the platform working for cloud providers. So the big dogs are able to buy and sell compute, but where it does become incredibly difficult is when you start to find the scalability and find the smaller architectures. So as you want to bring that to smaller and smaller devices, bringing it to gaming PCs, games consoles, even mobile phones to contribute to the network, and to be able to batch process workloads and figure out ways of distributing workloads across such a broad range of devices, that's where some of the big issues like really come to the fore on the technical side. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And it sounds like each one of your projects, you're approaching this, and well, you have different considerations as far as how you deliver scale and speed, and how you can leverage partnerships in this space. Do you feel like there's still a compromise that you're having to deal with now? What does that look like for you guys when you say, okay, in order to deliver this permissionless system over here, in order to deliver the speed that people demand, and then also have it be permissionless, we're going to have to maybe compromise a little bit and maybe go Web 2.5, if you will. What does that look like for you guys?
A big question, like for us, retention seems to be a problem. I'll be fully open, right? So we're able to track people, they come, they use. Why? Because we have no way to contact the user. Like it's a permissionless system, it's a wallet. People run out of their funds, and they forget about it, right? They won't realize their workload is down till they actually go see the workload. They may not have monitoring. So most of our drop-off, most of the churn comes from a lack of re-engagement with the user. So that's a challenge, right? The Web 2 has those tools, emails. We don't have emails, we don't have we don't have a lot of these tools that we have available. Like, what is a compromise? Offer a bone for an email. Right? Offer something that you can get an email, right? Maybe having a notification service that, you give us your email address and we give you notifications, which is valuable for people, right? So the Web 2.5 idea, I think it's not like there is still legacy infrastructure that the globe is connected to, and we can't just ignore the legacy infrastructure and expect people to just jump from Web 2 to Web 3 without providing the on and off ramp, right? You have to provide credit card onboarding somehow legally in the US, right? So those are a lot of challenges. So I wouldn't say compromises, I would say clever design we've done for credit card onboarding. So we have a feature called Auth-Z where you can delegate. We can decouple the payer from the user of compute. So we're using that mechanism where we have a hosted wallet that's paid using a credit card that's custodied by whoever needs the custody, and the user gets delegated from their wallet. So there's no ownership of tokens. So that's a legal way of doing credit card onboarding. So it's not like compromises, but just clever design that evolves over time. And I think in very, very soon we're going to have these systems come into play, and people will figure this out. And these patterns will become the global Web3 onboarding patterns. And I would give it another 2 years by the time Web3 goes mainstream.
Okay, great. And I appreciate that. Compromise is probably not the right word. I mean, these technologies in Web 2 have been used because they're useful. So, no reason to slash and burn if it helps maintain usability.
I mean, they're legacy systems. They need to be onboarded. Email is been around since '69, right? So it's such a thing. Like even Web 1 is pre-Web 1, Web 0, right? So, and people still use email, so you just can't ignore that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like if we want to have people in this space to bring value, you can't ignore the language that people are already using, right? As you're paving the way forward, it's got to connect to something, right? It's like, oh, okay, we're going to build the highway here to get to the future, but it's not, if it's not connected to anything else, then what's the point, right? You're just going to be treading that path alone. So creating these avenues to get people from the Web 2 space into the Web 3 space, which aren't independent things, right? I mean, how many of your dApps are actually hosted on AWS right now, right? I mean, that's a huge centralized infrastructure point to failure. And that's most of them, right? And that's okay, because if people can get to it, there are advantages. You are able to decentralize certain elements of it. You know, even your, you know, all of you who are creating incredible NFT games, you know, that NFT, even it gives you access to sick in-game assets, isn't actually useful despite owning it if the servers for your game go down, right? And so, you know, it is going to be incremental, and the most important thing is that on this journey, in this wild frontier, we're not alone, that we're bringing a crowd with us.
Yeah, awesome. Let me jump a little forward in the conversation, and I'm actually going to pick on you, Patrick. Sorry, I thought you were ready to make a comment, but I'm going to pick on you a little bit and ask a little bit about censorship and content moderation. We're running a bit short on time for our panel, but censorship and content moderation, I think the big underlying question would be, in your mind, in a perfect world, who decides? We call it permissionless, but we also know that Web 2 ran into some rough patches when it came to content moderation. And when people hear permissionless, they get understandably concerned.
Absolutely. So kind of to loop it back with the previous talk, the trade-off is compliance, right? So if you want to build a tool like this that has the highest digital privacy cybersecurity posture on market, where you're self-custodial of your private keys and we can't access your stuff, we're building a personal SSD in the cloud that we believe fundamentally that digital privacy is a fundamental human right. You should be able to own your own stuff. Your data should be your data, and we've locked ourselves out. So when it starts to becoming building new platforms that leverages this storage layer, that's on the people that choose to run those platforms, right? So we don't make the rules, and we've locked ourselves out of the system from the ground up because we don't think it's right for us to be bad actors in our own system. Also, the DAO can fire us as a dev entity, so we've also shifted a lot of the liability to a DAO that can keep us on as a SaaS company, right? So we've decentralized the entire process, and if you want to build a Web 2.5 bridge, you have to front load the compliance, and then you can spin up. You want to be an entrepreneur, leverage our storage, you have a bunch of margin to work with, and then provide a higher digital privacy cybersecurity posture. And then from there, you can be compliant in your own geographical region, right? So then you have to start to think about where's the data stored. You have to start to think about HIPAA compliance, where you have to pen test servers and things like that. And when you have a permissionless system where you serve the entire world of everyone with a cell phone, and you have to be compliant everywhere, it's kind of a silly thing to do. So what we decided, we take a hard line in the sand that we're building a truly permissionless and self-custodial system that your data is your data.
Awesome. And I'm going to pick on another panelist really quick before we wrap up. Ollie, you didn't see this one coming, but in moving into this Web 3 system, right? The more heavily Web 3, not Web 2.5 side. How do we balance the needs of fault tolerance and abuse, preventing abuse by adversarial agents, we'll call them? So whether we'll say it's a really large entity that can print money out of thin air and buy up your governance token, or some other imaginary scenario where there is a potential attack vector.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is a difficult problem to solve, and I think from the cloud provider side, you can sort of tackle a lot of this by having a rating system, much like when you lease your house on Airbnb. So having the network actually facilitate a rating system that can individually rate each compute unit, that does give that element of making sure that you've got that moderation there in terms of the what you're running your systems on. So we're familiar with a lot of the standards in terms of cloud computing and the rating systems for cloud infrastructures. But again, when you're going to a broader range of devices and a lot of providers, that rating system, it can't necessarily be trusted. So you have to almost give it to a DAO type model in order to make sure of that.
Got it, makes sense. Well, gentlemen, we are...
Linked to that, like proof of stake systems are inherently very communal based, right? What's going to prevent a bad actor, let's say Amazon, to buy up all the tokens and take over Akash network, right? I was recently, there was this Terra debacle. I don't know if you've been following my Twitter, but I had very little Luna position, but I was able to put a proposal in Terra, get it fast, and get it implemented very quickly with very little effort and very little clout in the community. What that tells you is proof of stake systems are inherently communal organisms. So if there's a bad actor that's trying to, number one, buy up all the tokens, that's going to increase the price of the token, thereby further strengthening security. And he still have to, there needs to be a seller, right? Let's assume they pay like 10x the thing, and that's how much they value the network. People get rich and people can fork it and start a new one, right? So always forking, there's always communal, community will always come through before an attack can happen. And there are also preventive circuit breakers, right? We have like 20-day unbonding period for that very reason. So you can have 21 days to actually react and whatnot. So that's my take.
Okay, awesome. First off, it sounds like, were you wearing a white hat when you did that at Terra?
So I had two proposals. Like first I did the Osmosis default proposal. I mean the whole like getting the default button. That at least have some cloud in the Osmosis community, but Terra was a different beast. Getting a proposal passed on Terra with zero cloud in the community was a clear example. Someone like me, an outsider, can actually have influence just by using Twitter and get a proposal passed that all people can agree. I mean, that I think people don't talk about resiliency in a proof of stake systems, and there's a clear example. An outsider with very little voting power or very little cloud can do that.
Right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. I don't think there's anything illegal that you did. I don't think you admitted to anything that was wrong just now. But
trying to get IBC passed. IBC. So they cut off IBC, and we had all our tokens stuck in Osmosis. I wanted IBC to re-enable so we can dump our Luna, but that came a little too late. But it is what it is. But we got the IBC enabled now.
Yeah. Awesome, gentlemen. Lighting round. Because we need to get off stage. Crystal ball time. Nobody's going to hold you to this. I mean, you might get retweeted a lot if you say the wrong thing, but no pressure. What's the future in this space? 15 seconds.
What's the future? I mean, this is the future. Web3 is the future. It's evolution of Web2. People may not like it, but it is the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's bringing new people in. I think it's community.
Just a really, really high digital privacy and cybersecurity posture, and making the stance on that going forward. And I think it's really, really important for the betterment of humanity.
Yeah, and I think just powering so much of what we know from the world already, and powering what we already know to be the future of blockchain tech, and really bringing it to the fore with what we know from Web 2, just combining them.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to the panelists. Follow them on Twitter. Check them all out on their socials. Thank you for your time.